Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Lessons That Last podcast. I'm Julie Hassan, professor and educational researcher, and with me is my adorable co-host,
Laura Estes-Swilly. I am a longtime English teacher and writer and lover of stories about teachers, talking about teachers, and just plain teachers.
Teachers are the best.
Right?
And we have a great story about a teacher today, a middle school math teacher, Mr. Sampson. Genelle shared her memories of his math class, and this sweet story blew me away.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. When you were talking to Genelle, did she get kind of like wistful about this? Because I imagine I would be, to have this powerful of an experience with a math teacher and a middle school math teacher. I think that I would just sort of like time travel if I was telling this story.
Always wondering about the emotions that people experience when they talk to me about their most memorable teachers. And for so many, and I'm imagining also Genelle, they haven't thought about those teachers for a while.
Right.
They're prompted by my question. You tell me about a teacher you remember. And it's this mix of emotions, gratitude, appreciation, love, joy, nostalgia. So I think it's such a mix of things. I don't remember her being outwardly emotional. I do remember that look in her eyes. It's the same look that most of them get. But she came across as just happy telling this story. And you can tell she was happy in his class, which might not be typical for all of us in our middle school math classes. How about you? What kind of a math student were you?
I was not a math student. I was in the class because that's where I was supposed to be. And I actually was thinking about this today when I was looking at Mr. Sampson's story again. In second grade, I remember really struggling with math. We had to do fractions, and I had to master fractions. And I don't know, that seems kind of young to me, but probably that's normal. And I struggled almost the entire year. And I had a teacher who was just in it to win it, and she fought with me, not against me, to help me get there. And that's the last time I remember really achieving something in a math class, second grade. And I do remember in middle school, a pre-algebra class. So I believe that we were in 9th grade because, of course, in our day, it wasn't middle school, it was junior high. And I was taking pre-algebra, and my class was at the front of the school, right by the road. And remember, I don't know if you remember, we had those giant walls of windows. And so it was very hard to focus, especially in the afternoon. And every day during my pre-algebra class, Derek Hottenroth would drive by on his way to work. And his car was so loud, I could hear it coming. So I would just like stare out the window waiting for him to drive by. And that's my memory of middle school math. Derek driving by on his way to work at the Albertsons.
Derek Hottenroth.
Right.
Solely responsible for your math struggles.
Right. My distraction.
I hope he's listening. I hope he apologizes.
But I think the truth is, I was glad Derek was coming because it gave me something to think about because I wasn't thinking about math. I remember the teacher having her overhead and sitting at the overhead with those markers. And she always had the blue hands from the overhead. And man, she was working. And I was not. I just wasn't there, because the last time I had really worked on math and really struggled to understand a mathematic concept was second grade. And I didn't know how to do it by the time I got to ninth grade. That was 7 years later.
Wow. And that's the thing about math, is it's building blocks, and each year builds on the next year. And if we start to miss pieces of that foundation, it's really difficult to learn the next year's content because there's gaps. And if we don't realize it and go back and fill in those gaps, there's no way we have a good, strong foundation for math.
No. And because you like blew past me with such a strong movement into math, I was taking Algebra 2 my senior year. Now, a lot of freshmen take Algebra 2, Julie. And I was struggling through it at 17 in my senior year with all the 10th graders. And I still wasn't mastering it. And I don't think I ever mastered it until I got to college. Somehow, college algebra and college math made sense to me. But until I got there, none of it made sense to me. So I don't know if just my brain developed a little differently, or I had professors who were able to reach me in a way that my high school teachers couldn't. But I know as a teacher on a high school campus for 23 years, I've many times been jealous of the teachers my students have had in their math classes.
It's magic to be a great math teacher, because you have to not only understand those concepts well, you have to be able to break them down. And I think the best math teachers I had understood them at a conceptual level. Like, they could explain to me the patterns behind the numbers and letters on the paper, because really math and numbers are patterns. And so if they could make it make sense to me beyond just the procedure that you have to do to solve the equation, those are the teachers who really worked for me as a learner in math. I needed to be able to understand what it represented in terms of the patterns and the values. I did way better in geometry because I understood, like, when you're asking for the radius of a circle, my mom was a seamstress, right? So I knew what it meant to measure area, or to figure out if you have enough fabric to make a certain pattern. Or, she painted and she renovated houses, so we measured for carpet and we measured for wallpaper. And geometry just always made sense. I knew what it looked like in the real world. And algebra, if people could put things in a real world context and explain like the pattern and help me understand the concept, I did fine. And I had some great math teachers. I don't think I struggled until I got to trigonometry. And for some reason, conceptually, I just struggled to understand that. And I had a dad who's an engineer, so he would say, well, I'll just show you an easier way to do it. And by the time he did, I was so confused. It just was a disaster.
Yeah, there's no easier way to do it when it's different than you're being taught in your class, because you have to do it your teacher's way. I didn't really grasp algebra until I understood how I could use it in determining the price of a sale item in a store. And I have used that my entire life. So I'm always like, really pay attention to solving for X, because you're going to need it. You're going to want to buy something on sale, and you need to know if you have enough money. And even though I'm an English teacher and there's that whole thing, English teachers don't do math, etc. And I'm sure that at times I feed into that stereotype. My family will sometimes be shocked at how quickly I do math in my head. and how quickly I solve for X in my head. And so that tells me I probably had the capacity for it. I just didn't get it because I didn't have the right person giving it to me or helping me through.
Interesting. And you have always needed a reason,
Yes.
a compelling why to learn something. And knowing what your discount is a compelling why. And I'm not sure we always do a good job with that, especially in math for kids. We give them these sort of random word problems, but do we help them understand the real life context of math? I know I had a sorority sister who was not great in math, and I just remember going to whatever the secondhand store was then in Lakeland, and she had like 3 tops and or 3 sweaters, something like that, and she was going to haggle with the man at the counter, and she wanted 3 for, like, will you give me all 3 for this much? And he responded back, and in the end, I think she, because she was not very good in math, ended up actually paying more for the 3 sweaters. I was proud of her bravery for haggling, but she probably should have used the calculator, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
She clearly did not have Mr. Sampson.
No. And I want to say something about that compelling why, because while you were talking about how maybe we don't always do the best at that in math, I was feeling a little convicted because I don't think we always do the best with that in English either. Why are we reading this story? Why are we reading this play? Why are we reading this poem? Because everyone doesn't wax philosophical about literature like I do. There has to be a reason and a buy-in and a why. And so I hear what you're saying 100%, because for me, had I had a compelling why, I probably would have been more engaged in that afternoon math class in 9th grade. But I think that's a message for all of us.
Well, and really, honestly, it's Derek Hottenroth.
It's his fault. It's 100% his fault. He had the curly hair. It was the curly hair.
He was lovely, and his car was lovely, and it's complete. I want you to know it's completely understandable.
Okay,
that
thank
distraction.
You. So we're gonna blame Derek for my lifelong math challenges, and I'm okay with that. I really am.
Yeah, and I think he would be okay with that as well. Probably a little flattered that he is the reason that you struggle in 9th grade.
Exactly.
No. Laura, will you share Genelle's story about Mr. Sampson with us?
I will. So Genelle says, when I entered Mr. Sampson's math class on the first day of 6th grade, I noticed the signs on the wall. One said, stay calm and problem solve on. Another one said, divide and conquer. His sense of humor was disarming, and he immediately made me feel more at ease. He only had 2 rules. 1, you're never wrong. You just haven't gotten there yet. 2, never, ever take out a red pen in math class. It was such a different approach. Mr. Sampson never marked anything wrong on our papers. He would just write, keep going. When I got stuck, he would ask me to tell him about my thinking. Talking through the problem was never scary, and I often found my own mistakes through his questioning. I began to feel less helpless and more confident. Mr. Sampson's math class was a turning point for me. I began to think that I could do hard things. I began to realize that with the right attitude and the right help, I could figure anything out. I have 2 daughters of my own now, and I try to model that approach for them. And thanks to the ripples of impact left by Mr. Sampson, they both love math.
Mr. Sampson.
I know, he has ripples. He's making waves all these years later.
And since I heard this story from Genelle, I have thought about this juxtaposition between wrong and work in progress.
I love that concept.
The problem's not wrong. wrong. You just haven't quite gotten to the right answer yet, which doesn't mean there's not a right answer, right? In math, there's clearly a right and a wrong answer. But the message was, I don't mark it wrong and you failed and you're done. It's, I don't mark it right yet because you're not there yet. And I love that approach. It's such a different approach to math.
It's a different approach to everything in education. When you said I haven't marked it right yet, I was like, oh, I haven't marked it right yet. That's an amazing paradigm shift. So great for kids and so great for teachers. Instead of looking at what's going wrong, looking at what's going right. That's amazing.
I love that. I mean, we throw out growth mindset all the time. This is growth mindset in practice.
Yes.
It's not wrong. You're not wrong. You're just not quite right yet.
Right. That's not quite right. Let's keep going. But then more than keep going, he said, let's keep going. Let me ask you some questions. Let's talk through this. And I have seen with my students, especially my AP students, so I'm teaching them at a really high level, asking them to do very hard things. And sometimes I'll say, let's talk this through. And it's so much less intimidating to talk to me than to write something down. Because when you write it down, it's real and it's going to be assessed and scored. But if you're just talking to me sitting at a table, it's a whole different ballgame. And I think he really brought that in to middle school math, which is amazing.
And he was a supporter, not a rescuer. So it also sent this message, you can get there. You can get there. I don't have to do it for you. I don't have to overhelp you. Mm-hmm. I just have to ask you some questions, push your thinking a little. High expectations. Like he had to believe that kids could get to the right place and not do it for them.
Right. And even his signs in the room, stay calm and problem solve. That was for them to do. Divide and conquer. You can do it. The message, even in the signs on the walls, were you can do this. And I'm right here to like kind of cheer you on, help you when you struggle, but it's yours and you can do it. And that's amazing to hand to a kid.
Especially in math, because so much of math is about anxiety and lack of confidence. And kids will walk into math class at some point. I want to say, if I think about my own, not Connor, because he was somehow born with math sense, but if I think about Kaylin, there was a point where she felt like, I'm just not a math kid.
Right.
And if we go into a classroom thinking, this is just not for me, we won't even attempt it. We certainly won't stick with it. So he had to build their competence and their confidence at the same time. And those things sort of fed each other.
Yes. Yeah. You have to be in it to win it as the kid, as the learner. Because like Mr. Sampson could have done anything he wanted to do. If I wasn't with him, it wasn't going to work. So he has to inspire that desire. And he was really good at that. I'm so jealous that I didn't have Mr. Sampson for math.
I know. Like a sense of humor in math. Yeah. And the understanding of how to build that sense of efficacy, how to empower kids, how to keep them going when they're struggling. Like this is a master class in teaching.
I agree. One of my friends from second grade published our gallery picture from our second grade class. And so it's all of our little faces. And so it took me right back, of course, to second grade. And there was my teacher right there. And whenever I see her, I think of two things. And one of them is fractions, man. And she stuck with me. And when I mastered that, I knew I could do pretty much anything because it was something that I did not understand, never thought I would understand, knew I really probably could never accomplish, but I was going to go along with her because she seemed to want me to. And then I did it and I got it and I kept it. So then I knew, oh, okay, so I can learn more things. I can learn new things. Somehow I lost that by middle school. Derek Hottenroth, but also had I been inspired that way in middle school too, gosh, who knows what I could be a math teacher today and not an English teacher.
Well, you could do anything you set your mind to, but you had a lot of messages, both internally and externally, that were different than what Genelle was getting in Mr. Sampson's class. When you talk about second grade and fractions, it gives me all the feels, because I spent a lot of years teaching fractions to second graders. And it's so challenging because we would have a round pie and there's fractions of that, or we would have a rectangular candy bar and there's fractions in that, or we would have a box of M&Ms and those pieces and there's fractions in that. And there's fractions exist in so many different forms depending on what we're dividing and how, that it is a really abstract, difficult concept for second graders. And it takes a long time of practicing and engaging with those problems and when they get it and the light bulb goes off, it's just the best. They go like this. Oh, and you're like, yes. But I remember thinking, if I give them anything, I don't want them to go into the grades after this saying, I'm just not good at this, or I'm just not good at that. So every subject I would say, okay, mathematicians, take out your pencil. Okay, writers, take out your journal. And there's something about inviting people into the content that you teach and saying, you are this. You might be struggling right now, but yes, you are, because you're here with me and we're working through this. You are a mathematician.
I love that. I, several years ago started if I give a handout, which I don't do a lot of handouts, especially in an AP class, but if I give a handout where I would put like name with a line, because you have to tell them where to put their names or they will never put their names, even as seniors, I started writing literary scholar : with the place for their names. And they would just laugh. And sometimes they would say, well, I don't know if this is me, but, and then they would write their name. And so by signing your name next to literary scholar, you're acknowledging you are a literary scholar. Even if you're giggling, even if you're saying, I don't know about that, it's like a little subtle message that you're giving.
Love that. I'm thinking about even when I email my graduate students who are starting the dissertation process, it will say, hello, researcher.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it doesn't matter how old we are. We respond to being told, yes, you are this. You may be a novice at this. You may be struggling a little, but this is not an exclusive club.
Right. You know? And sometimes you're even faking it until you're making it. And that's okay too, because everyone has to start with that first step, whether it's second grade fractions or graduate researchers. Everyone's new at it and starting something fresh once.
And talk to me about the red pen.
Okay. The red pen struck a chord with me that was so strong because I have never used a red pen to grade a paper in my life. And it all goes back to my internship. I had a girl in a speech class where I was interning. She was an IB student because I was in an IB school where they had traditional and IB, and the IB students would come to traditional for electives. And I graded something and gave it back with green pen. And she said, oh, it's such a relief to see green ink on my paper. The red is so stressful. And I had never thought about that. I just like the green pen. And so I will use any color, but I will never use red because she struck such a chord with me. And I've read over and over again and heard people say over and over again about how, especially an English teacher, will bleed all over a paper.
Mhm.
And that's that red ink. And it's so striking. And it says you're not good enough because it's red. Red means stop. Red means no. And Mr. Sampson understood that perfectly and would never use a red pen and would not even let his students use a red pen because red means stop. And we never stop. We never stop learning and we never stop growing as mathematicians or anything else we want to do or be. That was really cool of him to understand and internalize and teach to his students.
Yeah. And so much of math is done in pencil for a reason.
Right.
Mathematicians get things wrong often. They erase, they go back, they try again. So do writers. Before we had laptops, we have that white corrective tape
Yes.
on the typewriter, or we just throw it away and start again. But yes, there's a reason we do things in pencil and erase, and that we don't mark things with a red X and put a minus how many at the top. What a defeating thing to be handed back by your teacher.
Right. And I don't know really why. It's just what I've always done. I never write minus anything. Even if I'm giving half credit for a question, I write +5 or +7 and at the top, when I have my students often self-assess and we go over the answers and they write at the top, well, how many did you get correct? It's always how many you got correct. Never, however, how many you got wrong, because why would we think about that? Let's look at what we did. Let's look at what we can celebrate. I don't care how many it is. Those are wins, every single one of them. And so taking the negativity out of the classroom, which there is some negativity surrounding assessments. There just is. You can't help it. It's stressful for them. It's stressful for us. It's grading. We have to do it. But the more positive you can spin it, the better it is for everyone in the space.
Things I love about grad school is if you don't like the outcome of your paper, if you've got a ways to go, redo it and turn it back in, and I will reassess it. You don't have that freedom in K-12, depending on where you are and the policies that you're under. There's some freedom in teaching grad students. But just me saying that, hey, you can always resubmit for some reason is a relief. And they rarely need to. I mean, these are pretty strong students. But there's something about knowing you can and I feel like they're a little more bold in their work.
Yes.
Because there's a freedom in knowing if I miss the mark a bit, I can fix it or change it and turn it back in. And I feel like that's what Mr. Sampson was saying too. Give it a go. Get started. Let's work through this. If you're not there yet, we'll keep going and I'll support you.
I agree. One of the things that is a challenge in my life is I am teaching emerging writers, right? From regular honors, AP, all the way up. And they have to take risks. You don't grow without risk. And it's really hard to take a risk in writing. And so you and I know, because we just finished writing a book, and you, right before that, finished writing another book. And a lot of people, once they finish school, don't think about writing, but we need to, because our kids are learning to be writers as well. You don't grow as a writer if you don't take risks, and you can't really take full risks if you don't have an opportunity to save yourself if you trip and fall. And so that policy, that ability to say, oh, you can take another pass at this. Oh, you don't like what you scored, or you don't like how you did? Let's try something else, is a wonderful gift to be able to give to students. And so you're right, in K-12, we can't do that with the big assessments, the state assessments, and that kind of thing. But in classroom assessments, of course we can. And why wouldn't we?
I love that. And I think nothing has helped me grow as a writer more than my mistakes, or more than feedback that says, I don't really understand what you're trying to say here.
Exactly.
by having to revise and having to revise, you get stronger. I imagine that's true in math as well. Having to figure out where your thinking was off or where your error is in a problem has to make you a better math student.
Right. And so instead of just putting that X and saying wrong, the teacher or the professor says, hey, this isn't quite right. You're almost there. Let's talk about your thinking. Well, now we're in a metacognitive space. And now I'm really learning the mistake I made, and I probably won't make it again because I got to see it and I got to find it. It's not just an X and a -10 or minus however many. It's real learning about the process. And that's what math is. You have to understand the process. And I think that's what I was missing for so long is the process.
Yeah. All that metacognitive, thinking about our thinking and knowing where we're going wrong. One thing I love, so many things I love, but one thing I love about all of these stories is whatever the content is and whatever the grade level is, even as a professor teaching graduate students, I can pull something from the model of the teacher to make me a better teacher. So middle school math, Mr. Sampson. High school English, Mrs. Asuswili. What will you take from Mr. Sampson this week?
That's a great question. I think that I've already taken some things from Mr. Sampson because I do encourage the redo, the second try, the let's talk it out before you make a final decision or make a final answer. But also, I really like his lighthearted approach to things. I think that all of us, including me, can get a little too serious sometimes. I know it's hard to believe, but I can get a little too serious sometimes, especially about my content, because I love my content so much and I want them to understand it so badly that I can get a little narrowly focused. And so remembering to open that focus a little bit and let them in and be a little more free with it, I think sounds like a great takeaway from Mr. Sampson.
Nice. I love that too. And I even love the poster, keep calm and problem solve on.
Yes, exactly.
My students are all learning to be principals or superintendents, and all they do is problem solve. Keep calm and problem solve on could serve many of us. So listeners, I hope you're thinking about what you're going to take from Mr. Sampson's story this week. Derek Hottenroth, if you're listening, hope you own your responsibility for a generation of women in Brandon, Florida who struggled because you went to work in was it a Camaro?
It was a muscle car of some sort. It was maroon. I know it was maroon. That I do know that.
So Derek Hottenroth in your maroon muscle car, I hope you take responsibility for your impact on the academic success of the women of Brandon, Florida. Oh my goodness.
But we made it. We made it, Derek. Don't worry. We're all right. We're okay.
We are no worse for the wear. We turned out okay.
That's right.
Despite that challenge, despite all the distractions, because truth be told, Derek Hottenroth was not the only distraction.
No, not at all.
No. Yet here we are. So listeners, please take something from Genelle's sweet story about Mr. Sampson this week. And I hope one thing you will take is the affirmation that the small things you do, I should say seemingly small, things you do in the classroom every day make a big impact on students' lives, creates these ripples of impact that touch everyone that student touches. Thank you, teachers, for all that you do. You know what I say, we don't deserve you, but I'm so glad we have you. And if you loved this episode, share it with a teacher friend who could use some encouragement on a Sunday heading into the week ahead. Remember to subscribe, whatever podcast platform you are listening to us on, or if you're watching us on YouTube. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Lessons That Last podcast. The story Laura shared today can be found on the Chalk and Chances website, along with many more stories and resources. Just visit chalkandchances.com. You can even take the quiz to find out what kind of memorable teacher you are. See you next Sunday for another episode of Lessons That Last.